everybody, how are you today? On this day in history, July 19th, 1799, during Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign, a French soldier discovered a black basalt slab inscribed with ancient writing near the town of Rosetta, which we all know as the Rosetta Stone. This unlocked the Egyptian language for ancient historians so that they were able to start learning about their culture. I just want to start by saying that this week's news cycle has been really tough to read about. Yesterday, while I was getting all my notes and stuff together, I was having a really hard time with all of the news. It's pretty scary what's been going on. Again, I've been following this border crisis pretty closely because I do live in New Mexico, so I know a lot of immigrants who have come from Mexico and other places in South America, and these people are close friends, and some of them are even family members. And so these issues have always been really close to my heart. But the fact that things have gotten so dire here in our nation is even more terrifying and disturbing for me, because this is really history repeating itself. In our past, we have had Japanese internment camps that are hardly different than the internment camps that we're keeping these South American asylum seekers in. And I just really want to emphasize the fact that most of the people that have been detained at the border are seeking asylum from places like Guatemala and Honduras. They're not actually coming from Mexico itself. Now, I just want to highlight the fact that according to international law, which the UN spearheaded, we as a developed nation are legally required to accept asylum seekers into our country and provide them with the same basic, not full, but the same basic rights as any other citizen in the country, until their asylum status is either approved or denied, at which point they will either become residents of the nation that they have fled to, or they will be deported back to their country of origin. Now, let me check this out. This law was written into effect. This law was written into effect after World War II, when the U.S. turned away more than 20,000 Jews that were trying to flee Nazi Germany. Those 20,000 Jews that we turned away included a number of children, and they all died. So after that event, the UN got together and agreed to sign a pact that they would not do that shit anymore. So far, this year, since the beginning of 2018, 1,610 people have crossed the border seeking asylum and been detained. Not only is it illegal to turn away an asylum seeker when they come to your shores seeking asylum, it's also illegal to punish them for seeking asylum. That is exactly what Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump are doing to these people. Some of the laws that have been written recently, that have been passed recently by Jeff Sessions, and again, Trump's administration is trying to claim that the laws that they're using to enforce this policy were written by Democrats. They are misinterpreting and abusing laws that have been in long standing, and they have slightly altered the way that we accept asylum seekers as well. This is a quote directly from the New York Times, and it says, "Anyone who spends more than 2 weeks traveling through Mexico would be ineligible for asylum," an order by Jeff Sessions. This is a joke. The average journey through Mexico takes a month, and people are being forced to wait weeks at many ports of entry. So this move would conveniently disqualify most migrants, end quote. So people are coming to the border seeking asylum, which has been the trend for, last several decades. If you're not safe in your country, you can go to a Western country, a developed country, and they will help you find safety. So people come from Guatemala and Honduras, and when they present themselves at legal ports of entry, where you're supposed to present yourself, and they present themselves at these legal ports of entry and tell ICE agents, I am from Guatemala, I am seeking asylum. Some people are seeking asylum to escape domestic violence because the police forces in their country will not help them escape domestic violence. Some of these people are seeking asylum because they've been political activists in their country of origin, and they're being threatened by political leaders, which is a shoo-in for asylum status. If you're trying to free your culture and you start getting death threats, that's like standard asylum status stuff. These people come and present themselves as asylum seekers, and instead of being allowed to cross the border like they should legally be allowed to cross the border because they're asylum seekers, they're taken to detention centers all over the country. In some of these detention centers, people are being held in what they call the ice boxes. They're holding pens that are freezing cold. And I don't know, I mean, I personally have never had to spend any time in a jail cell, but I've heard that they're pretty cold most of the time. And so these people are in here with just the clothes on their backs, and it's freezing cold. And so much of the time, these people aren't even being given adequate food. There are some shelters that seem to be doing a better job of being humanitarian about their care of these people. Like in New York, it sounds like their facilities are much nicer than, for example, Texas and Arizona. Of course, Texas and Arizona are probably the most full because they're the closest to these areas that are being affected. So sometimes these people aren't being fed at all. Sometimes their food has maggots and worms in it because of a lack of hygiene within the kitchens. A lot of these people get out of prison or get out of detention to try to find their children. They haven't eaten in days. Volunteers tell stories about how they bought these people food and they threw up because their bodies couldn't accept food. And so they're being detained while they're in detention, especially those who've had their children removed from them, obviously are freaking out. And so these ICE agents, who knows how good their bilingual skills are, these ICE agents and various volunteers and organizations that have gotten involved to try to handle the situation, they explain to these people, well, if you just agree to go back to your country, we'll give you your kid back and you can go. But if you decide to stay and have a fear interview, which is the first step in an asylum intake process, if you decide to stay and have a fear interview, we could hold you for months. We don't know when you'll see your child again. So Trump recently released an order saying that he was no longer going to be separating families. That does not mean that he isn't still illegally detaining asylum seekers. He may not be separating families, but he's still holding them hostage. And his executive order didn't explain what he was going to do in order to reunite these children. So a particular judge issued an order, made him give the children who are under 5 years old back to their parents. There was a bunch of litigation and stuff going on in the midst of all of that, where Trump was trying to, in his own words, aggressively vet parents who are trying to get their children back from the American government. Under Obama's policy, whenever parents came into the country with children, if something like this happened, when they got their children back, they were usually offered something called humanitarian parole. So basically, a person would come, their asylum status would be denied, and then they would be deported. If their child was still in the United States in foster care or whatever else, Obama would grant them something called humanitarian parole in order for these parents to come back and claim their children on American soil. And this is relevant because let me see if I have the number here. This is important because somewhere between 10 and 15 children who are under the age of 5, their parents have already been sent back to their countries of origin. And of course, Trump is not enforcing the same policy of humanitarian parole that Obama did. He's playing this game where he's like, well, I just don't know. It's out of our jurisdiction. I don't know how we're going to get it back to you guys. It's not our problem. And I'm really tired of hearing this nonsense, because if he was an actual politician, he would know about recent laws that have been passed and how they're supposed to be enforced. But of course, the man is a moron. And I'm sorry, I'm getting angry. Anyway, so I hear a lot of people claiming that these people deserve to be detained. They deserve to have their children taken away from them because they're quote unquote breaking the law. But there is no law saying that you can't leave your country for fear for your life and try to seek safety in a developed country. And as I said at the beginning of the video, it's actually against the law of the UN, for the US to be denying these people entry into our country and to be punishing them for seeking safety. So this is a quote from a particular mom, or no, this is a quote from, I believe, a lawyer who is helping one of these mothers get her children back. She says, they take the children and then tell the parents that if they agree to voluntary deportation, you can see your kid at the airport. But if you choose to seek asylum, we will hold you for months. We don't know when you will see your child. The situation is so dire that there have been people who died to lack of medical care, people who died to lack of basic resources like food, and, general hygiene. Not to mention the fact that a few parents have become so overwhelmed with grief that they've killed themselves in their cell. And I'm not really sure how many people have killed themselves in their cells. There's not a lot of accurate reporting coming out of these places. The children who have been released and spoken to reporters talk about military-style routines where they're forced to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, scrub the bathrooms and toilets, get in line, go eat breakfast, and basically, live a day that's almost exactly like a prisoner's life. The only real difference being that for 5 hours out of their day, they sit around and get taught a nationalist education that focuses heavily on recent events in America, Donald Trump, and American patriotism, rather than teaching them, maybe why they're being detained. This is another quote from a little girl who wrote a letter to her mother. I want to first, before I read this, just point out they're not supposed to write unless they're in class, and they're only supposed to write what the lesson is about. One little girl describes having to hide letters that she's writing to her mother and keep them in a box. In one of these letters that was given to a journalist, a little girl is quoted as saying in the letter, "Mommy, I love you and adore you and miss you so much. Please, Mom, communicate. Please, Mom. I hope that you're okay. And remember, you are the best thing in my life." I broke down into tears when I read that. And yeah, this is intense. This is a little girl. She's like 6 or something. And another little boy describes how he was brave and he didn't cry. And because of this, he was treated well and even given special honors as a leader among the other children in his group because he behaved so well. This little boy describes another little boy like him who could not manage his emotions as well and would regularly freak out, throw things, and become violent because of the situation that he's in. And this child would be held down by, quote unquote, the doctor, whoever that is, and forced an ejection, which would make him pass out in the middle of class. So how is that not intimidation for the other children in the room who may be feeling just as frustrated and hopeless as the little boy that just freaked out? And now they're like, oh, I better mind my P's and Q's or they're going to knock me out. Anyone who tries to tell me that this isn't genocide, I swear to God, I'll punch them in the face myself. And a lot of this anger that I'm feeling today is really coming from a deep sense of sadness and loss on behalf of these people. Reading the stories of these mothers is just absolutely devastating. And while I'm reading them, all I can think about is my own little girl. One of these women describes how she escaped a situation of domestic violence that became so bad, her husband shoved a knife up her vagina And the local law enforcement told her that they couldn't do anything for her and told her to leave the country. So she comes to America after being in this situation. Her daughter is taken from her. Some of these kids, when they reunite with their parents, are so traumatized they can't speak, have been so traumatized they don't recognize their own parents. One little girl who was about 10 years old completely shut down and stopped speaking to both of her siblings that were there with her in her detention center. It's just the saddest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And the fact that anybody in this country wants to justify it because they want to deport people, like, they're asylum seekers. The United States is breaking international humanitarian law by refusing to take these people in and help them. I'm appalled. I'm confounded. There are so many other things going on in our country. Trump is really playing a game right now, and it's important, and I want to highlight it because I've sort of gone through all of my source material about the deportation issue. He is still saying that he's going to deport these people. The few parents who have been released are released with ankle monitors on them. I'm not really sure how that's different than making a Jewish person wear a patch in a ghetto. It identifies them, it singles them out from the rest of society, and it allows the government to know exactly where they are at any given moment. Everybody wants to say that these people are coming here to steal our jobs. Okay, the jobs that have been lost since Trump started deporting people en masse through the ICE agency are all farming jobs. It's all farming, picking tomatoes, that kind of stuff. It's manual labor work. And, you know, I haven't met a lot of white boys in my life that say that they want to grow up and go work on a farm. But I've met a lot of Mexican people in my life who say, I grew up in really squalid conditions, and this is nothing. This work that I'm doing here for this amount of money, I'm happy because I'm able to support myself and take care of my family, and my children are safe, and my wife is safe, and everything is good here in America. You know, they're not coming here to steal our jobs. They're coming here for a better life. And it's so important, especially when looking at history, to acknowledge exactly how all of this happened. Why are these people who have such evil intentions in power? How did it happen? How did the resources in these communities get redistributed to the West so that the people that live in those locales can't access them? How does that happen? Oh yeah, global trade. That's right. So we create this problem of violence because these people are trying to live off of their land, but all of the stuff that they're growing is going somewhere else. So the people aren't directly benefiting off of any of the resources around them. They're getting paid in humanitarian wages in most of these countries. And so then they come to America for a better life, and all we can do is cry about how they're taking our cotton picking jobs. And I don't know very many people who would go do that for the amount that we usually pay immigrants to do it. If you want a white boy to go pick some fields, be prepared to pay him $15 an hour. So, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense when Germany did this to the Jews. It didn't make any sense when we did this to the Native Americans. It didn't make any sense when we did it to the Japanese. And it doesn't make any sense now that we're doing it to South Americans. At the same time that all of this is going on at the border, keeping people like me who are more concerned about others than themselves distracted by the atrocities being committed on our own soil by our own citizens, while we're all distracted with that, Trump is busy cozying up to Putin, making enemies with our allies that we've been allies with for like hundreds of years. He's directly attacked Angela Merkel. He's directly attacked the leader of Britain. He had a meeting with the Queen of England. He's been meeting with all of these leaders, and he's also met with Putin. So now, all of a sudden, for some strange reason, Putin has a seat at our table, and he's negotiating with us. I could get into world politics and why this is such a big deal, but I'd like to save that for another video when I can go more in depth about the history of the conflict in Syria, how Russia is involved in it, and what the fuck is Trump doing with his dick in his hand. So it's all pretty crazy. It's all pretty cray-cray. Trump is doing this thing at the border to keep Americans distracted. At the same time, he's slashing our medical benefits. He's creating work requirements for Medicaid recipients who are often already working 40 hours a week. So he's waging war on the poor. And that's exactly what they call it. They're not even mincing words. In the New York Times, Trump was quoted as saying that the war on poverty has been won. What kind of sense does that make? Poverty isn't a battle. It's just obnoxious. It's just so obnoxious. And this is my country. So, this has been a hard week for me. It's been really hard staying up to date with things. It hurts me deep down inside to read the stories about these parents who are being ripped away from their children, trying to save their children's lives. It's devastating. It's the saddest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And it's happening in the country that's supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're the most cowardly, unfree bastards I've ever met in my life. And I can't remember who said it. If you know, please post it in the comments. Somebody was once quoted as saying that no one is more hopelessly enslaved than he who believes he is free. When you have a leader sitting behind a pulpit saying that you need to deport and or kill people, and I've even heard rumors, and I won't quote this because I don't have a source on it, but I've heard rumors that people are talking about allowing ICE agents the power to execute immigrants on sight. So that's the second part of Stage 8 genocide, which I've been talking about through all of these movies. We're in the beginnings of Stage 8, and there are potentially conversations going on about how we're going to enter the last phase of Stage 8 and actually start exterminating Mexicans, who aren't even Mexicans. They're Guatemalan citizens. How are the Guatemalan citizens going to prove that they're from Guatemala and not Mexico when the ICE agents took all of their documentation and vanished it into thin air? So once these people get their children, if they choose to seek asylum status in our country, they're going to be living in pretty awful conditions for a while until they get themselves some rights in this country. And the most likely thing that's going to happen is they're just going to get out and out deported. A judge has issued an order to stop mass deportations, so that helps. And I'm really proud of our judicial system for standing up to the executive branch and enforcing their democratic power against this tyrant who is trying desperately to turn our country into Nazi Germany or communist Russia, and I'm not really sure which one it is, but I'm not game for either of those plans. So what can we do? Because it's what it all boils down to. It's not enough to just talk about what's going on. It's not enough to bring attention to the issues, and it's not enough to cry just because some woman is literally going through her worst nightmare. It's not enough. We actually need to do more. We need to be contacting our representatives. In New Mexico, I know my representatives are already fighting to bring this to an end. But we need to be contacting our representatives. We need to be going to demonstrations. If you see ICE in your area, stage a protest. Make a blockade. Don't let them go find these people. These people are here. They need help. They need compassion. They need love. And it's important to remember that the only reason that the Germans did not succeed in exterminating the entire Jewish population in Europe is because there were thousands and thousands of people who stood up to the Gestapo and hid these people so that they didn't have to die for being born, because that's essentially what's happening. So volunteers are still a huge part of what's going on with reuniting these families. People need legal representation. 9 in 10 of these cases that do not have legal representation are denied, and these people are deported. When these people have legal representation, their cases are still denied 50% of the time. So legal representation is really important. You know, anybody who's a lawyer that cares about humanitarian concerns, encourage them to do some pro bono work for these people. It's the right thing. If you are traveling across country and you happen to be living in either Oregon, Arizona, California, Florida, New York, or Texas, Take one of these mothers with you across country so that she can get back to her kids. These people are desperate. These children are so traumatized. And then you can also just send money. A lot of people have started GoFundMes to support these people. A lot of people have bought them food. In Portland, a group of protesters surrounded an ICE complex and would not let anyone stay, come or go for a certain amount of time. That was really courageous and amazing. And that's the kind of political force that we need to create to really bring this to an end. I do not want to see a second Holocaust happen in my own country after everything that we've fought for these last 300 years. I just can't. I can't do it. I bring up the quote at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty a lot, and I'm going to keep bringing it up because it embodies the tenets, all of the tenets of our nation. Freedom and justice for all. For all. If we're a country who believes any of the things that we say we believed when we started this great nation, we absolutely must make this stop. For those of us who don't live in any of the states affected, just contact your congressman, especially if they happen to be on the right side of the fence. The more pressure Trump gets from his own political party, the less he'll be able to ignore what's going on. I believe you can even contact the president directly, and I'm sure that would annoy the crap out of him. And I love the story about that little boy who got kidnapped, and he just annoyed his kidnappers so much that they finally let him go. Yeah, we need to be that little boy. We need to annoy Trump and all of his cronies until they give up and go home. I got a little bit of eyeshadow going on under my eye again, so I'm just going to clean this up real quick because it looks a little funny. And, you know, jokingly, I just want to acknowledge how very first world and white woman it is of me to be doing a makeup tutorial and talking about global political issues at the same time. Comical even. Absolutely comical. But it helps me stay calm and not scream and yell because I'm really actually deeply hurt and angry about everything that's going on. I didn't grow up calling myself a patriot to watch my country turn into this. So, we're just about out of time. I'm going to tack on some lipstick here and slay this motherfucking day. I want to thank everybody for watching. Remember, self-care is important. Don't forget to take the time you need to process, to feel, to grieve, to be angry, and then do something about it. Don't just sit in your room and cry because that doesn't help anybody. Pity is wonderful, but nobody needs anybody's pity. We need sympathy, we need empathy, we need action. If you have any information that you would like to share with me, any stories that you'd like me to cover, anything that I haven't brought attention to, please feel free to contact me, either via private message or in the comments, and I will check out whatever it is you have to throw at me. I recently started speaking to a friend of mine about some bigger global issues, and since We are experiencing an upswell to bring this crisis at the border to an end. I'm probably going to shift a little bit and spend my time 50% on domestic issues and 50% on global issues. I'm going to be changing my primary source material from the New York Times to BBC. And the reason for that being that BBC is not tied to the government of Britain. It is an independent agency, and they are not politically invested at all. They report on the issues that are most impactful, and they send investigative reporters into the middle of the action. And I think that is going to give me a lot more information than I've been getting so far. I'm a little bit short on time during the week as far as like being able to do solid research goes. So I'm going to check that out. Hopefully next week I'll have more information. Hopefully next week we will also start seeing more of these families being reunited and given the justice that they deserve from developed countries that benefit off of their misfortune. It's important to acknowledge our privilege. It's important to challenge the status quo. For any of you ladies out there that happen to have a really good support system and maybe even a wealthy family, run for fucking office, man. Go take that shit by storm. If you really want to make a difference, give these old fogies a run for their money. It's a new game. It's a new territory. They think that they have the American population completely distracted with Facebook and social media and the Kardashians. But I don't believe them. I don't believe it for a second. I think that the American population is full of concerned Americans who do care about human rights and do want to see the right thing done. And I think if we all band together and we stop pretending like this is anything other than irresponsible economic policy, then, you know, we can do this, girls. We can definitely do this. Alrighty. That's my video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for following. Like, share, slay, comment, keep calm, and carry on. I love you guys. Bye.